Anyway, as has already been said this morning, we're not done yet. I'll bring us around the Word. We've been looking at in the beginning series, and we've been looking at the creation story, Adam and Eve. We've moved up, now we're going to be talking about Cain and Abel. I'd like you to welcome you to the first two men in history with belly buttons. Makes sense, doesn't it? Adam and Eve were created, they weren't really born, so these guys, born, they would have an umbilical cord scar, they'd have belly buttons, right? So I thought I'd get the weird stuff out first before I went on. I know we've covered a lot of this stuff already. We looked at creation. It's not, this creation story, not a scientific document, but there is some science involved, isn't there, in the making of the world? But this is a poem of God's unfolding mystery. And I'm okay with that. And I think we should all get to the place where we're okay with that. In other words, I'm okay with God keeping some of the mysteries to himself. My faith is not going to depend on all the biblical equations lining up. In fact, the word faith means, isn't it, believing in someone or something that we don't know everything about or we don't see. And yet this faith, something about it tells me it's real. So I'm okay with the unanswered questions in Genesis. In fact, it's the unanswered stuff, the mysteries that really spark my interest, if I'm honest. It's the what ifs, how did that happen, the try and work it out to an answer to a question, and then when you think you've got an answer to that question, that leads to 5 other questions. It's the adventure of it. It's not knowing what's coming up next. It's what makes it exciting. I think it's the same stuff that makes me excited about space and the universe and learning what, there's stuff that we've discovered in space that blows our mind. And then there's stuff we don't know that blows our mind. And then there's stuff we think we know that we sort of unlearn when we learn other things, and that blows our minds. You can come to the conclusion we don't know everything about the universe, about space, or about the beginning of life. And I'm okay with not knowing everything. Different to when I was 18, I did know everything, but now things have changed. And let's face it, if we knew everything, we would be God, wouldn't we? And none of us would want that responsibility. I mean, you'd never get a day off, would you? Therefore, I start reading in the beginning with excitement, enthusiasm, and a sense of adventure. And what will we discover today? So I'm okay with the belly button issue, even though churches have split over that one, if you can believe that. They've split over that issue, yeah. I'm okay with the issue where Cain got his wife from. Were there other people around? Or one other theory, did he marry his sister? Which is just sick, isn't it? I mean, even fellas growing up in Allendale know that's not right. It's just some things you don't do. Although, Abraham did marry his half-sister, so stranger things have happened. I'm okay with the mark that gets put onto Cain, that God puts a mark on Cain, whatever that is. A mark that tells Cain, there's a mark put on him so that others won't kill him. Now, who are the others? It sort of suggests there might be others around. And I'm okay with Cain at the end of this story. He gets sent away, east, wherever that is. I mean, east of what? Is China or India? Actually, one of Cain's, his grandchild, actually, his name is Irad. He maybe went to Iran or something, or Iraq, and that's it. No. Anyway, we'll get getting the weird stuff out of the way first. In amongst all the weird stuff, we have to ask, what is God actually telling us? So let's open our Bible, shall we, to Genesis chapter 4. Adam made love to his wife Eve, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Cain. She said, "With the help of the Lord, I have brought forth a man." And later she gave birth to his brother Abel. Now Abel kept flocks, and Cain worked the soil. And in the course of time, Cain brought some of the first of the soil, the fruits of the soil, as an offering to the Lord. And Abel also brought an offering, fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. The Lord looked with favour on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering he did not look on with favour. So Cain was very angry and his face was downcast. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what's right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what's right, then sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it." Now Cain said to his brother Abel, "Let's go out into the field." And while they're in the field, Cain attacked his brother and killed him. And the Lord said to him, "Where is your brother Abel?" "I don't know," he replied. "Am I my brother's keeper?" God didn't answer that question. "Yes, you are." The Lord said, "What have you done?" Excuse me. "Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Now you're under a curse and driven from the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you. You'll be a restless wanderer on earth." Cain said to the Lord, "My punishment is more than I can bear. Today you are driving me from the land, and I will be hidden from your presence. I will be a restless wanderer on earth, and whoever finds me will kill me." The Lord said, "Not so. Anyone who kills Cain will suffer vengeance 7 times over." Then the Lord put a mark on Cain so that no one who found him would kill him. So Cain went out from the Lord's presence and lived in the land of Nod, east of Eden. In amongst all the weird stuff, we focus on what God wants to tell us this morning. So I'm looking at 3 things. Firstly, the problem, the curse, and thirdly, the remedy. In our story, in our series called The Beginning, we look at the beginning of creation. There's things created, things made new. But when we look at the story of Cain, instead, it's the beginning of something else. It's now the beginning of the journey away from God. In the beginning, we see things created and made new, but now it's the beginning of the end. Things that Cain has done is sort of started this decay and moving away from God. The problem? These are the questions that people sit in prison and ask themselves. How did I get here? What were the decisions I made that led me to sitting in this place? How did it come to this? We've learnt already that Adam and Eve's decision to disobey God and to eat from the tree, and thinking they will be like God if they do that. Even after God explained what would happen if they did that, their disobedience, their sin led to, amongst other things, a sentence of being kicked out of the Garden of Eden. As we read the account of Cain and Abel, we know that Cain moved east. He moved away from Eden. So these guys may be kicked out of the Garden of Eden, but they're still sort of, I think we can assume they're still in the region of Eden, okay? So there's this movement out. There's the move from the garden out to the region, and then Cain goes further. So they're still in the region of Eden, not in the paradise anymore, like Cam spoke about a few weeks ago, and that temple imagery of the paradise of the Garden of Eden. They're not in there anymore. They've moved out, but they're not miles away yet. They're still in this region, the district council of Eden, if you like. Not in Mount Gambier anymore. It's like the Tarpina thing, you know, the Tarpina equivalent. And all this expulsion from the garden, from moving away from God, doesn't sound very nice. It sounds difficult, painful and humiliating. But that's what sin does, isn't it? Worse from that, and aside from any of that, it's the separation from God. And the separation from his best. We see in Eden there's a very close connection with God. Man walks with Adam in the garden. It's a perfect, peaceful setting. There's communion with God. There is one-on-one closeness. And after the man's sin, the first thing we lost, even before we lost our lives and became mortal, we lost that closeness of connection with our Creator. We had to move out. And the real problem with sin is that it separates us from God. But wait, in our account of Cain and Abel, we are reading that these two men are talking with God. Offerings are going on. This must give us the grounds for hope, right? God is not absent from their lives. He's speaking to them. Cain and Abel is speaking to God and vice versa. They're bringing offerings to God. All this sounds kind of the same as the garden, but different. We don't see the closeness between man and God anymore. God isn't walking with men like he used to with Adam. But there is this degree of separation. All we hear now is God's speaking to God, bringing offerings to God, but the closeness doesn't seem to be there. So was he there at all? Or is this a conversation by God's Spirit speaking to us like he does today? We don't know. What we do know is the problem. And the problem is separation from God. And it gets worse. After Cain murders his brother and God sends him away to the east, we don't know where that is, but all we need to know is it's further away than this. We've moved from the garden, we've moved to the next space, and now we're further away again. The separation has multiplied. The place where Cain moves to, we don't know where that is, but it's a place where God doesn't seem to communicate at all. In fact, Cain says, I will be hidden from your presence. Not even in the garden anymore, not even in the district council of Eden. We're miles away from God. And we don't even hear that God even speaks to him again or his descendants. When Cain doesn't offer the most favourable offering to God, he walks away, and the Bible tells us that he's very angry and downcast. But now that he's in a different land as well, he's very angry, downcast, and miles away from God. Angry, downcast, and godless. If I can be bold and generalise our statement of our world today, those that aren't Christians, we are angry, downcast, and miles away from God. Angry, downcast, and godless. And on top of all the separation, Cain receives a curse, just like Adam and Eve before him received a curse. And I think he got off a bit lightly. He did kill his brother after all. But one of the commentaries I read on this, the sin committed by the first man caused the second man to kill the third man. The sin committed by the first man caused the second man to kill the third man. And we haven't reached that place in the Bible where we have the Mosaic laws and there's God's laws that says if you kill someone then you too must die. But this is God's laws. That's God's justice. If you shed blood, then blood shall be required. And God has had this problem, this dilemma, from the beginning of time. The people I've created have done something deserving death. And yet I created them and I don't want them to die. It's a conflict of interest. God is the judge and the jury. He is also the creator and the father as well. And all this just leaves God feeling torn in two. The curse makes me wonder actually what a curse actually is. If you wondered that, you might have pictures in your head of a nursery rhyme and a witch cursing someone or something, or just thinking of someone that has endless bad luck in their life. Or maybe you picture God pointing at someone with a lightning bolt, zapping someone just to strike them down, to smite them, you know. Is a curse a big angry God pronouncing punishment, or simply cause and effect? A God who makes the rules in the first place, something I'm very thankful for because we do a rubbish job of it. We're still doing a rubbish job of it today. God who makes the rules, telling us not to break his rules or consequences will happen. Don't eat from that tree, you two, or you will die. Cain, sin is crouching at your door. Get mastery over it before it kills you. Cause and effect. If I step off a tall building, when I hit the ground, it's going to hurt. Not because God has cursed me, but because I've broken the law called gravity. So Cain receives a curse. And the first part of this curse is to do with the land, the same as his father had. It says, I'll curse the land and you'll have weeds coming out of it that you're going to have to pull up or spray with Roundup. The curse that Cain gets is another degree of it. We talk about this multiplication of separation. It's another degree. It's a steps up a notch. Now the ground isn't going to yield a thing. And we see this multiplication again. Cain is moving further away from God and also further away from his blessing and his influence. And I have to ask the question, is God here speaking only about the dirt? Or is there something bigger going on? Is the curse just about growing food, or is from now on, everything Cain puts his hand to, is it going to be difficult to achieve anything at all? All of life from now is going to seem unproductive and frustrating. Life itself, it seems to turn against you and be pointless. Maybe that's why they called him a restless wanderer. So now we have Cain. He's angry, cursed, downcast, and miles away from God. Angry, cursed, downcast, and godless. So we need a remedy, don't we? We need a remedy. As we read more of this chapter, we see this multiplication effect on Cain's family and descendants. Murder has happened again down the road. We'll hear about Cain's great grandson, Lamech, who was sitting down with his wives by the fire, his two wives, having a deep and meaningful with them, and he says, I've killed a guy. And if the curse on Cain is 7 times, then that curse is now on me 77 times. And this multiplication again of the curse, multiplication of the separation of God, multiplication of sin. Mankind just goes from worse to worse. And so bad, in fact, at the end of the chapter, we hear that people are calling out to the name of the Lord. Why? Because in the next chapter we see that God is grieved that he even made man because the earth is so full of violence. It gets worse and worse, and eventually we need God to sort it out. And you know something? We still need God to sort it out. Cannot save ourselves from our own mess. So where do we begin? The answer is pretty simple. Just give God what he wants, right? Give God what he wants. Abel's offering to God, and I always thought that, Abel offered the perfect sacrifice. And he did, but it's not the sort of sacrifice that we think about in the sense that God has demanded something to be done. We're not at that place in Moses' time where something had to be sacrificed on regular occasions and it was God's will for it to happen. We're not there yet. This is not a sacrifice that God demanded. These are offerings. Cain and Abel brought these offerings to God just because they wanted to. It's important to remember that as we go on. It says God was pleased with Abel's offering, but Cain's, I'm not a fan. Not a fan. That doesn't mean God never said he hated Cain or hated his offering or hated him for not bringing the right thing. It's simply the fact that Abel gave God what he wanted. So what did he want? You know, every year about September, I get a chorus of that same sort of thing. Dad, what do you want for Father's Day? What do you want for Father's Day? No, they don't know what to get to me, so they ask. It's a good idea. And I launch into my speech of what I want for Father's Day, which is usually a joke that they're sick of by now. But I'll say, I'd like some respect. I'd like some credibility, some dignity restored, perhaps, some compassion, maybe listen to my stories, laugh at my jokes, things like that. They're sick of it now. They get that same joke every year, but they get it anyway. So they take that information on board and then buy me chocolates. If you don't know what to get me, they ask. Cain, just ask. God, what do you want from me? So why was Abel's offering so special? You could be a Christian with only one of your senses working and you should be able to see the imagery in this story. Abel was a shepherd. He kept flocks. He brought to God the fat portions of his flock. He brought the firstborn of his flock. More than likely, this is a year-old lamb. More than likely. So what did Abel bring to God? He brought the remedy. And I picture myself with God looking at Abel's offering. It must have brought a tear to his eye. It says God was pleased with Abel's offering. I think it's an understatement. I think it'd be more poignant to say God was moved by this moment. He would have looked at this offering that Abel brought by his own free will, remember? It's not something God demanded, his own free will. And he would have looked at this offering and saw a picture of what his son will one day do. I used to think, why didn't Cain just try again? Why didn't he just go to his brother and say, I'll buy a lamb off you, I'll do the same thing, and then we're both happy, both of the good books. But it would have missed the point entirely. This stuff has nothing to do with whose offering's better and one-upping your brother. It's nothing to do with petty sort of childish stuff like that. This is a moment. Abel has brought the solution. He's brought the remedy to God. The solution to man's rebellion from God. A perfect and blameless sacrifice, except that it's not a sacrifice in the sense that God demanded it. Abel bought it by his own free will. Thousands of years from this point, we're going to see a blameless man who comes and doesn't, we say sacrifice his life for us, we do, and I know what you mean, but it's not as if God demanded this of him. He gave it of his own free will. This is his own offering. A remedy. And when Lamech said that his life's been cursed 77 times, later Jesus is teaching his disciples and they say, how much should I forgive my brother? He says, 77 times. What do you say, 7 times 77? I forgot. Lots of sevens, anyway. All that means is it's the process of undoing the curse. You might be cursed as many times as you think. God's forgiveness through Christ is more. It's an unwinding of the curse, a remedy to God, an offering that pleases God and makes a way for us to return not just to the district council of Eden, but to the garden. And we can once again walk with God, not separated anymore. Closeness restored. So, Abel was there, he's brought this perfect sacrifice to God. It's by his own free will. God looks at that and is moved. There's a moment in time. No other sacrifice is going to cut it. Didn't matter what someone brought. You couldn't repeat this, bring another offering the same, it just wouldn't count. Wouldn't matter. This was a moment that moved God to his bones. What could have Cain done instead of what he did? What should he done when his brother offered the perfect sacrifice, the perfect offering? Well done, little brother. That's the best thing you can do. You gave God what he wanted. The perfect thing. I can't top that. We should have reacted in thankfulness. Thankfulness. And what should we do when the perfect offering is given to us through Christ? Just be thankful. Receive it and be thankful. Because nothing else will come close. Let's pray. Lord, we're reminded today of how far the world is away from you, and how far we were away from you before we followed you, before we accepted you. There is this multiplication of separation of the world, and everywhere we look, the people are angry, they're downcast, and they're miles away from you, even godless. But today, Lord, we see your remedy. We see your offering that was brought to us on a cross. A man who was blameless and gave his life up willingly and freely so that we can live. Our prayer is, Lord, that the rest of the world will see the remedy. They put aside being angry and frustrated and godless. That they may see you and see the perfect remedy that you offered and give you thanks and receive it with praise. In your name. Amen. We're going to